This is the Artist Entrepreneur Podcast. We are your hosts, Amanda Ritchie, Noah Dock, and me, Carrie Wee. We're three artists brought together by the love of circus and dance. Amanda from the world of Cirque du Soleil as an aerial soloist. Noah, our academic, and me from the commercial dance world. This is one of the greatest jobs in the world, but it comes with uncertainty. Each episode contains insight on how to pursue art-based businesses. We'll have a variety of guests and have lively weekly Discord. Tune in every week to hear our perspectives on the minefield that is the artist's way of life. Hey everyone, today's episode is a little bit of a departure, although still very relevant to our subject of the artist entrepreneur. Renowned dramatic tenor Limmie Pulliam died suddenly in Houston, Texas on the night of May 18th at the age of 50 while visiting his family, and the official cause of death has not been publicly released. Limmie Pulliam was my RA in my freshman year of college. He was training to be an opera singer at Oberlin College with me. And I've been in touch with him. We did an interview in 2023 about his meteoric rise to the top of his career. He had been flying around all over the world singing for different operas. And my friend, his life got extinguished on Monday. I'm very heartbroken. I'm shocked. And to celebrate his life and his legacy, I wanted to share his interview that I did with him just a couple years ago. For this audience, I feel like it's relevant because he went about his career in a very, it wasn't a normal way. He didn't go in a straight line. He actually completely stopped singing and went in other directions for a decade before he found his way back. And it is a story of redemption and finding your career on your own terms when the world was ready. So I can't wait for you guys to get to know him. Let's get started.
Weird Mama, can you hear me?
Oh, hey. Oh my goodness. Let me see this face. Oh, Lim.
What's up?
My sister, Kathleen, she sent me your NPR article and she's like, why do I remember this name so much? You should find out who he is. I was like, that's my dorm dad from freshman year in Barrows. Of course I know Limmie.
Yeah.
I know. He's on fire with a capital F. He's on fire. I know this. He's been on fire. And I was just, I was doing a little perusing on the interwebs before this interview, and New York Times just covered you.
Yeah.
And NPR just covered you. And I was thinking, what an obvious level up to come on greener grass after those slightly known media outlets.
But you're Carrie Wee. You're a superstar in my eyes.
I love it. So I wanted to share my first memory of you before we get started into this this weaving path to success that you have. Oh God. Limmie and I went to this amazing liberal arts college called Oberlin.
Oberlin.
Everybody I know from Oberlin is very proud. Very proud. It is one of the finest music conservatories in the land. It has an amazing science and arts bachelor's program.
Yeah. I
somehow got into this college.
Of course you did.
Mostly because my sister got in first, which makes you a legacy, even if your sister only goes there 2 years ahead of you. I was in Barrows, the freshman dorm of all freshman dorms, and I knew I was going to a really progressive college, but we all meet for our first freshman meeting, and the first item on the what we have to decide as a group list is bathrooms.
Oh yeah, that's always fun.
What did you have to talk to us about as the dorm dad?
The first big decision you all had to make was whether or not you wanted to have co-ed bathrooms.
Yeah.
Or if you wanted to leave them as they were, to have a male bathroom, female bathroom, or just have a free-for-all. So that was the first big decision.
It was 1995?
Yeah.
5. You were a sophomore at the time?
Mm-hmm.
That's also incredible to me that as a sophomore that let you be in charge of things.
I know. It's crazy.
You know, as a teenager, you're like, wow, that's so cool. We're so progressive. We're going to share bathrooms. There's no gender here, blah, blah, blah. And you said, just keep in mind, you might be taking a shit next to the hot guy down the hall. And then I was like, oh, dude, that's true.
Yeah, that could kind of make things a little awkward, and you're in there squeezing one out, and you walk out, and he's standing there, and he's like, wow.
You know what? This is going to be way more entertaining than the NPR podcast with you because you're so professional. You didn't have somebody talking about the stuff. That's why it's fun. People like listening to this, I think. Yeah, we both finished there, and I remember you and I were friends throughout college, and I had a lot of friends in the opera program, which is where you were studying. Your story is a kind of winding road. Your New York Times article was about the body shaming that you have experienced over the years in your industry. And from what I understood as a non-opera major is that everybody was talking about like, okay, after you graduate, you do your capstone, basically your big show at the end of your senior year. And then you try to get into Juilliard for master's degree or, Manhattan School of Music or one of those top 5 schools, continue your education. And then you try to, the word is not intern. What is the word in your world when you
you try to get into a young artist program, basically an intern. Join a program that's within a larger organization like Chicago Lyric Opera or San Francisco, the Marilla program, or you had the Lindemann program at the Metropolitan Opera. And so those were kind of your goals to get into one of those programs. Chicago, San Francisco, New York, Pittsburgh had a great program. And so that's the road most people wanted to take.
Yeah, it seemed like it was very ABCD. Like you didn't have a lot of choices from what I understood.
We didn't think we had many choices.
Yeah.
But, because everybody thought, oh, this is the way you have to do it. But, obviously there was other ways to do it or we wouldn't be sitting here today.
What was your path that first decade of after school? Well,
I went, when I left Oberlin, I was singing professionally. I didn't go into a young artist program. I was singing with smaller regional companies, Memphis Opera, Delaware Opera, different places like that. And I sang for about 2.5 years after I left Oberlin. And then decided to do, just got so tired of everything that was going on. Just tired of the industry, tired of the stress and, constantly being berated by people within the industry and not having any ways to address it without being, without the fear of retribution or being, blacklisted or, labeled as being difficult.
What were those things?
It was about your size, how you looked. Everyone would always say, oh, you have such a beautiful voice, blah, 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 blah. But you need to lose weight. You need to lose weight. You got to lose weight. You got to lose weight. Nobody's going to hire you if you don't lose weight. And that even started at Oberlin, where
really,
yeah, where people were like, oh, you're going to have to lose weight, if you want to have a career, blah, 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 blah. So it was, it was kind of ingrained in people that you had to look a certain way, regardless of how you sound, in order to have a career. And that if you didn't look that way, you were unworthy of a career and you were just wasting your time.
I don't know. I just had this picture in my mind that opera singers were these people with big voices and it didn't really matter.
Well, big voices, big bodies, that was sort of the end of that era. Where things were starting to change and people were wanting to, they were moving into doing more kind of the beginning of the live broadcast era.
Okay.
Opera. And so, they wanted to be more Hollywood-esque and, to have people be, in their terms to look more realistic in their roles. So I guess, they assumed that, people of size didn't know how to love, didn't know how to be sad, or or to portray a character, or we weren't able to portray believable characters. I just got tired of all that, and I decided to walk away.
You went into security because you were so fed up with the opera industry. I remember I was on tour with the crew, Motley Crue.
Mm-hmm.
I have a memory of us talking about this during that time. I think I had a moment where like a fan like rushed the stage and Mick Mars's bodyguard tackled this person flying off the stage into the steel.
Oh, the barricade. Oh my gosh.
And got really hurt. Like,
wow.
This huge dude got really hurt and had to go home off of tour because of that. But like, he just threw his body. Like, he did not have any, he did not care. He was like, I got to save Mick.
Yeah, it was, yeah, I did go into security, and it was a crazy job. And, you know, there were people like that who would, you know, you had to be willing to just kind of throw care to the wind and do your job. And unfortunately, you know, sometimes people got hurt in incidents like that, where they have to kind of throw themselves between their client and an exuberant fan, even though that person's goal is not to necessarily hurt them.
Yeah.
But you know, exuberant fans are almost as dangerous as a crazed fan. In their excitement, they can do a lot of damage and you know, cause a lot of injury.
Were you worried about your instrument at all during that time? Where you were like, my voice, my face?
Not really at the time. It was, you know, it was always something I'd been interested in doing. You know, that was the last of my concerns at that point. You know, because I kind of went through what I say a rebellious phase when I stopped singing, and when I got into the, you know, first I went into collections and whatnot, and was working in the collections industry, and then this local position opened up in security for a concert venue, and that's how I kind of made my leeway into this, as I started working with, which was then Clear Channel, at one of their venues. And after a couple of years there, I had the opportunity to start my own firm. So I did. And it was, you know, it was then that I wasn't really worried about my voice. It was something that I hid from a lot of people. Though some of the people who worked for me knew about it, and they would sometimes, you know, say to our clients, "Oh, you know, he used to be an opera singer." And I'm like, "No, we don't tell clients that." You know, because someone would be like, "Oh yeah, why don't you sing something for me?" I'm like, "Nope, not going to happen." But I did go through a rebellious phase during that time where I think I was trying to just, you know, self-destructive behavior. I started smoking.
What?
Yeah.
No, you didn't tell NPR that.
No. Well, you get the scoop. You get the scoop.
Oh, so wait. Did you enjoy it?
I guess I grew to enjoy it.
Like nicotine or weed?
No, cigarettes.
Okay, that's what I thought, because when people say smoking, they usually mean cigarettes. So
yeah.
How long were you smoking?
Probably 2.5 years, 2.5, 3 years.
Shut the door.
Yeah.
And do you regret that time?
Not necessarily, because luckily it didn't do the damage that it could have done. You know, it was part of my path, you know, and so I'm grateful for the path that I had, and I don't know if I would necessarily change anything at this point.
So at some point you started to work for Barack Obama's campaign, which, did you think you're going to go into politics, or did you just...
I've always been interested in politics. Even when I was in high school, I volunteered for campaigns and whatnot, and would go out and, you know, knock doors and hang things on doorknobs, you know, and the Clinton Gore was my first campaign that I volunteered for. You know, so it was one of those things that's always interested me. You know, I attended Missouri Boys State, which dealt with learning about government and legislation and all that stuff. And so it was always something that I had some interest in. And the opportunity came up in late 2007, early 2008, where I was offered a position as a field organizer for Barack Obama's first presidential campaign. And so I was in charge of field operations for 5 counties in Missouri, southeastern Missouri, an area where I grew up, and had a blast doing it. Who would have thought that joining a political campaign would be the thing that kind of led me back to singing? I never did, but that's what happened.
So the story is that you were working for his campaign, and at a particular event, somebody wimped out on the
national anthem.
And you were asked to step in, and you didn't want to, but you did.
Yeah.
Did you practice at all that day?
No.
What?
I wasn't even warmed up. I hadn't warmed up in years at that point. So it was just like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to find the key that actually works for me. Right.
Okay.
Because I don't even know if I can, sing all the high notes at this point. So it was like, okay, let's find a key low enough that I can, still sing the lowest notes, but not have to sing too high.
And how did you figure that out without practicing?
I just picked, I knew what key I used to sing it in.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, so we're not going to start there because I know that's impossible.
How many keys did you step down?
I think I went down maybe a third.
Okay.
From where I had been. When I was singing, my low end was about a middle C, somewhere in there.
Okay.
So I knew I didn't want to go any lower than that, or try to go any lower than that. But I also didn't know. I know I didn't want to have to sing, a high B flat or anything like that because I had no clue what would have come out if I had.
So at this venue, were you doing it a cappella?
Yeah, a cappella.
Woo!
Acapulco, as we say.
So a cappella, did you have a pitch?
I had a pitch pipe.
Okay.
Back then, we still had the little brown pitch.
Right.
Now I have an app on my phone that I can just kind of beep if I need a pitch. But I had a pitch pipe with me, and actually, I went and borrowed a pitch pipe from my high school choir director.
So you knew a day or two in advance?
No, when they told me I was going to have to do it, I called her. I was like, "Look, I need a pitch pipe."
How much time did you have between knowing and then doing?
It was maybe an hour or two.
You were in your hometown?
Yeah, I was in my hometown.
Okay, and so I'm still like, as a performer, like if I had to dance a performance right now,
mm-hmm.
which wouldn't be too far off base, there is no way in hell I wouldn't practice before.
Yeah, the last place you want to do it is in your hometown. Yeah.
No. The last thing I would do is not do it once or twice before going on stage.
That wasn't my concern. My thing was like, oh, I wish I were somewhere else other than my hometown doing this, because they knew my voice from when I was singing and when I grew up. So they knew what I was capable of. And the last thing I want to do is like get up and not sound good in front of people who knew how I used to sound.
So you didn't have any worries that you could sing it generally. You just didn't want anybody to
I didn't know how good it was going to be.
This is my question after listening to the NPR interview, because you said, obviously you kind of found different things in your voice, and it was during these moments of surprise singing, let's call it #surprise singing. Were you having that like out of body experience where you were like singing, you're like, wait,
well, yeah,
what's
it
that?
started to go up in the range towards the range in the end. It was kind of like, okay, this is kind of interesting. Wait, this note used to be very hard for me to sing. Why is it so easy right now? When I got to the end of it, it was kind of like, okay, that was strangely good, much better than I thought it would be. And I started to analyze it and kind of think back on it. And then another opportunity, the second opportunity arose for me to do it at one of our staff retreats. And at that one, I actually got brave enough to do it in the key that I used to sing it in. So I was singing it with the high notes. And
did you practice that time?
I practiced that time and did it.
But But only to test it, though.
Only to test the notes.
Only to test it, not to actually practice.
Yeah, not to actually practice, just to see if the notes would come out. And they did. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to do it in this key. I'm going to do it back in my original key. And after that, we were kind of in the home stretch of the campaign. And once the campaign was over, I started, I immediately went to my storage unit, and pulled out all my videotapes of lessons and whatnot, and was like, okay, obviously something's changed vocally here, and it's something interesting, more interesting than I remember. So why not see where this is going to go? Where could this lead? And so I started working and studying on my own with my lesson tapes from Oberlin.
So let's go to the recent last year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that stands out to me more than the success, honestly, because I'm your friend, and I applaud your professional success, but you had a lot of loss recently. I remember specifically you lost your father in the last year.
On Mother's Day of last year, May 8th. And it was one of those things. We were, it was after dealing with the pandemic for 2 years of pandemic, we had managed to avoid COVID in our house. And at the time, I was also helping take care of my dad. I was one of his caretakers. And that week, my mom got COVID and had to go into isolation. And then I went into isolation to hopefully avoid getting it, because I knew I had performances coming up within the next couple of weeks of that time. So she went in isolation to kind of protect my dad from getting it. I went in isolation to avoid getting it from her. And, the next day I ended up testing positive myself. So my mom and I were both positive, and, dealing with the medications and whatnot, and being in isolation. And and then towards the end of our illness, it was just one of those unexpected things where, you get that phone call I got a phone call from my older brother, and the first thing I hear are sirens in the background, and he tells me what's going on. And I'm just like, wait, okay, this can't be real. But it was, one of the days of life that I feared the most, that I had hoped I'd never have to deal with, but I knew I would at some point. But it was, lost my dad Mother's Day. And then the day of his funeral, I literally had to leave home a couple hours after the funeral to drive to the airport to get on a plane to fly to my next gig, because my family insisted. They were like, no, you're going to work. You got to work. And it turned out to be the best thing for me to be there with my colleagues making music. And it was tough. It was hard, but it was the right decision to go back to work.
And that gig was one of the big ones.
That was the biggest gig of my career to that point. My debut with the Cleveland Orchestra.
Cleveland Orchestra. And what role were you?
I was singing the role of Otello in Verdi's Otello, which is, kind of one of the pinnacle tenor roles in all of the repertoire.
When you were really starting to pick up, what year was that?
It really started towards the end of the shutdown of the pandemic. Things were, before the pandemic, we were building so much momentum, and things were starting to happen career-wise. And then all of a sudden, the pandemic hits and everything gets shut down, all of these, contracts and big performances I had scheduled started to disappear. Um, there were operas, there were concert tours, things of that nature that all kind of vanished over several months, and some of them held out until the very last minute and until they had to cancel in hopes of being able to continue, but they weren't able to. So going into the pandemic during the shutdown, it was like, okay, if we come out of this, how am I going to rebuild this momentum? We were really starting to pick up some steam, and then it's all gone. This was 2020. This was 2019. We had some stuff starting in the works that were going to be potentially career changing opportunities for me.
I remember we were like DMing on Instagram because you're going to be in LA for the LA Opera.
Yeah.
Big deal. Was that the end of 2020 or 2021?
That was in 2021. And that was kind of the, where I was like, wait, what are we going to do to kind of rebuild this momentum? And then out of nowhere, the LA Opera opportunity came about. And so it was like, oh, okay, this is a good way to come out of the pandemic. And so I made my debut with LA Opera in Trovatore as Manrico, and had a fabulous time there, working with Maestro Conlon and the staff, and had a great cast. And and that kind of put me on this new road to, I guess, to what some may call success, or but on the path to where I am now. It's, started with LA, and then did some other things, and then the Cleveland thing came about after losing my dad. Went on to Cleveland, sang Otello there. A couple of weeks after Cleveland, I get a call to do a debut with the Philadelphia Orchestra, because they had a singer sick with COVID and they needed a tenor for their Beethoven 9 performance. So I went and did several performances of Beethoven 9 in Philadelphia. Yeah, and then the cover contract at the Met came about, to be an understudy for Aida at the Met. And then not long after that, the call came from Oberlin wanting me to do some performances of the Ordering of Moses, which is an oratorio written by one of our alumni, Nathaniel Dett. They wanted to do a performance in Oberlin, and then they said, we're going to do a performance at Carnegie Hall. We'd like you to be a part of both of them. I went from wondering how we were going to start rebuilding to, having such great opportunities come my way, that, I was extremely grateful for those opportunities and to be back working. I knew how lucky I was to be one of the people who was actually out there still working, because so many of my colleagues were still kind of struggling to rebuild and to kind of regain traction and to start rebuilding their schedules after the things begin to open up. I don't take any of the opportunities that have come my way for granted because of that.
Going back to the issues that you had the first decade of your career, what has changed there? Is that your voice changed and that overrides some of the other stuff, or has the industry changed enough?
Well, I don't know. I don't necessarily know that the industry has changed, but I know I've changed. One of the important things is that I took the time to kind of learn to love myself for who I am, for what I am, where I am in life, and to not let the opinions of others dictate my self-worth, or how I felt about my self-worth. I began to, once that happened, I was able to kind of turn things around for myself with regards to auditioning. Whereas before, I would walk into a room and I realized I wasn't walking into that room as confidently as I could, because I knew that at some point they're going to say something about my size. So I knew I had to make some changes in that, because I was walking into the room already defeated in a way. So now, upon learning to kind of love who I am, I can walk into any room knowing that I belong there. No longer do I walk in with my head down, trying to, minimize myself to take up less space. Now when I walk into a room, I want to eat up as much oxygen in that room as I can. I want to take up all the space. This is my room.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm just going to allow you to have a little bit of space over there in my room.
I mean, maybe this is growing up and being in our 40s and, not early 40s anymore, Limmie. That resonates with me so much in both ways. In seeing you, I have to say too, I think I found my voice the way it should be maybe last year. Mm-hmm. It took me that long. Like, oh my God, I can't even tell you how many years of my career I just wanted my eyes to be bigger. I just put on so much makeup. Yeah. Because I just wanted these big eyes like all the white girls. And and I wanted to be taller, and I wanted, I don't know.
And the whole time you were fabulous just the way you were.
And the way I see you, maybe that should be the lesson to everyone out there. It's just like, if I could have figured out how to be so confident in who I was earlier, not just to make me more successful, but just for more happiness, mm-hmm. And I'm so glad that you got to that point, and in time for this moment of your life, and for me in time for the moment of organically passing it on to a bean. Yeah. Because I think it's happening. I mean, look at her sassiness. Yeah. That sassiness doesn't come out of anything but confidence. How does one, as a teacher or somebody like you who can be such a role model to others, how can we help people find that sooner? Because
I don't know if we can.
It was a painful road for both of us,
Yeah, it was a painful road, but I don't know if we can actually help others. If we can, I haven't figured it out, but it's a matter of just, because everyone's journey is different, and there's no set way to get there. For me, it was a matter of having to take these detours through other industries, and which eventually led me back to where I was supposed to be. But that may not necessarily be the route to take for other people. I guess it's a matter of just taking the time to be comfortable with yourself, comfortable being alone. It
gets hard when other people are saying the exact opposite to your face.
Yeah, and it can be, especially as a young artist who's in the beginning of a career, doing many, many auditions, and if they're constantly being berated with, critiques from auditions and critiques about their body and or their voice, or whatever it may be, all of that can make it extremely difficult to get to that point where one can be loving and accepting of oneself, and realizing that, despite what others may say, that you're enough. And right where you are right now, you're enough, and you're worthy of a potential career in this industry or whatever industry it may be. And that your size or your look or your voice shouldn't be a hindrance to that.
The power that you exude in your voice, in your confidence, in your body, coming out of your pores, It's amazing to see. I've always seen you that way. I mean, you were my dorm dad, so obviously you're always like in a position of slight authority. Also, not that much authority because we would all stumble home from the SCO.
Yeah. I was a pretty lenient dad, dorm dad.
What's your favorite moment or poignant moment from all the most recent success?
It had to be having the opportunity to make my Metropolitan Opera debut and to stand on that stage where all of my operatic heroes have stood, and to look out into that auditorium, and to walk from behind that gold curtain at the end of the night, like so many of my heroes had done before me, and to kind of stand there and have the audience greet you with this amazingly generous applause. And in the midst of that, to have the opportunity to kind of reflect on the last year of my life, thinking about my dad, thinking about my eldest sister who also passed away in November, and just about the journey in general. It's one of those moments I will never, ever, ever, ever forget. Because we always strive to be, as artists, to be vulnerable in front of our audiences. And that was the instance where I think I've allowed myself to be my most vulnerable. And thinking about my dad, thinking about my sister, thinking about my family, thinking about all the teachers who had poured into me over the years, voice teachers, music teachers, everyone who's been part of the amazing support system I've had over the years, to get to that moment and to be able to stand in front of an audience who's on their feet clapping and not be ashamed to just let the tears flow, because that's what I was feeling in that moment, was just this overwhelming, in that moment I felt the overwhelming joy, the overwhelming losses that I had experienced. All of the emotions from all of that were just kind of whirling around there. And all I could do was just kind of hold on. And as I say, hold on for the ride. And they just kind of manifested themselves in these tears, on the stage of the Metropolitan Opera, which some people may have been embarrassed about, but in that moment, it was all I could do. It was, I couldn't hold it back any longer. I'd been holding back so many different feelings and emotions for so long, to kind of get through the work and just to be able to continue on singing. You have to compartmentalize and suppress and, different feelings and whatnot. And, it was in that moment that I knew I could just be in the moment and feel and not have to worry about anything else. And so I did. I cried like a baby on the Metropolitan Opera stage during my bows.
I don't know. Maybe some people might be embarrassed by that, but as a person that is a lover of art, if I go to see an opera or see a ballet, I don't necessarily feel like the emotion is shared between the artists and the audience all the time. Like you go and, I've been to many dance performances where I cry like a baby as an audience member because it's touched me in a way, right. Or especially when I was younger, I really wanted to be that person. I remember seeing Savion Glover tap dance, and on Broadway and I cried like a baby, that type of thing. And it's very rare that the performer shares that, reflects it back at you, and it really connects with, of course you're connecting with your performance, but that wasn't your role anymore. That was Limmie.
Yeah.
You were being Limmie at the end of, at your bow. You weren't being your character anymore. And I think that is a really rare experience for the audience, and now for the greater audience because of YouTube, to see somebody, you're my dorm dad, but for most part, you're at the top of your game, opera singer on one of the biggest stages of the world. And you are just letting yourself be vulnerable. And that teaches other people to do the same in their own lives. And so, yes, maybe that would be embarrassing for some, but I feel like as an audience member, maybe that's when they connected with you most. Mm-hmm. I think that people need to see that vulnerability sometimes. And it's so great that the story is shared. You're not just in these roles, but you get to share your story and your pathway, because it is inspirational to others. For anybody out there who's like in any industry, who's been shamed because what they look like or what they sound like, or their personality, to be able to find a way back to it, with so much power. I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of you. And I'm also grateful to see that the world has decided to get out of your way. Like, get out of the way, man.
I'm coming anyway. So
yeah, you're coming anyway. I love this.
Like, move or get knocked out of the way.
Yeah, like that whole taking up space. I think for the young people out there who's, young in their career, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Like, your time is as valuable as anybody else. And
yeah, we only have one life to live, so we have to make the most of it.
This part's going in the end of podcast. I have to say, New York Times and NPR, I got a better interview, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think I keep in touch with you more than probably anybody else from that time period. From who are my dorm kids.
Eat your heart out, NPR and New York Times. Yeah, so I look forward to seeing your new roles in the next year or so, and then maybe we'll have you back to talk about them.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Thank you so much for tuning in. You can find Amanda Ritchie at Grounded in Flight on Instagram, and at Noah Doc on Instagram, as well as Red Flags app. And me, Carrie Wee, you can find at wrapyourheadaroundsilks.com. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. We have so much more coming at you, including guests that are in this art world, that are blazing their way through new businesses, and just more banter from us. Thank you for listening. This is The Artist Entrepreneur.